only thing that's been redacted from what was actually provided to the White House and key oversight committees was the list of names that are people who don't want to be known publicly, but are willing to be intel sources and whistleblowers privately. So I make a distinction between the relatively small 10% or so of whistleblowers who are willing to stick their necks out and be known publicly versus the ones who have come forward and whose backgrounds we've checked and want to give information. Those names are unredacted in the full briefing document. But obviously, and when people say, please keep my name private, I do.
Both all the information that's being put forth in this podcast right now, absolutely, I urge everybody to read, to watch, to digest, because the information, it's so mind-blowing. You really got to study and take your time to wrap your mind about how big this is all.
Huge story.
It's the biggest story of mankind. This is what was kind of interesting in the documentary. And it plays out in real time where you're talking about the false flag invasion and this effort to scare the public. And it would be this kind of look of, E.T. And right after you said that, within a week or so of filming the documentary, and we showcase it, within a week of your statements, you bring forth basically fortune telling, because a drone thing happened in New Jersey while all this was going on. Explain to me, some people, Russ is saying it's from China. You were saying that this is all an inside job, but again, it's not an individual country. This is transnational. Can you go into a little bit more detail about what happened over New Jersey in the United States?
Yeah, well, that entire episode was because the group that was going to defect with all the asymmetric disclosure evidence that were convinced not to. That was done as a false flag and a testing of media, but also as a diversion, a panic-inducing diversion in advance of that. Remember, that was all going on November, December. The plan was prior to January 20th to release all of that, and that got diverted and put into a blind alley, a dead end. Which we were not happy with. Law enforcement nor I were happy with that, but that's what happened. Now, I think that what you need to really understand about that is that all of them were man-made. They were from various places, and when you start talking about a transnational organization with these assets, it means it goes beyond international geopolitical boundaries. So I've always said, when I go into a skiff or a meeting with people up on the Hill or anywhere else, I go look at here's a picture of the Earth, and there are the political lines between Russia and China or US and Canada. Erase them. This organization operates with alacrity and freedom across all those boundaries. So to say that they're from China or they're from a covert cell within the United States that's treasonous, or from Russia, or from United Kingdom, or it's an irrelevant distinction. It's a distinction without any significance, which is something our political leaders have yet to grasp, frankly, because this organization simply doesn't recognize the authority of any national government, including that of the United States and the president and the Congress. If they did, they would not be working in a criminal fashion outside the rule of law, which I've stated has been the case since 1993, when I first learned that the president and the CIA director were actively blocked from knowing about the subject. As soon as I knew that, it was the easiest thing in the world for me to connect those dots and go, well, here's the evidence that this is real and it's going on. My uncle had his whole career at Northrop Grumman. And yet, the president and the CIA director are being blocked. The only explanation for that, and of course then I later found that key oversight committees and chairmen that I dealt with in the 90s, key people in the Pentagon, senior most people in military intelligence, like the director of the Defense Intelligence Agency, were being blocked from this information. I concluded by 1997 and wrote a memo to the government This is a criminal organization. It's illegal. All their clearances are voided. All their security clearances are voided because they're criminal. We're going to bring out anything we can, including documents and testimony, and if we could, material. And it's not in violation of any national security laws. And listen, anyone who's out there who's a whistleblower, listen carefully. Every single person in the US government, legal, agrees with what I just said, from the top down. Everyone. That these programs are illegal, therefore you are not bound by your non-disclosure agreement, because that agreement is attached to a criminal, treasonous, unconstitutional program. End of discussion. And that was the assessment we made almost 30 years ago. So my conclusion had been reached 32 years ago in 1993. Now, over the decades, there is a group of people in government, both at the national security and law enforcement level, but also political level, that have concluded this as well, because enough evidence has been provided that that is the case. And the amount of monies that have been embezzled are mind-boggling. So the false flag operations are done to just divert and confuse people just trying to get their head around this. And what happens, I mean, I won't say which chairman of a key committee in the Senate said this, but he basically was so fed up with the information versus the disinformation and the confusing sort of avalanche of conflicting data that he threw his arms up in the air and said, I'm done with this. I'm not even going to look into it anymore. That is a strategy. That is a specific strategy, and it's worked well for 50, 60 years.